Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is September 27th. There are a lot of important news stories. In this episode, how Russia, using its combat drones, wants to set up Ukraine in order to stop European aid. Orban is once again at the center of a scandal. So who is actually launching drones over Europe? And the IAEA is coming to Moscow but remains silent about the main issue. And Lukashenko has stated that Putin already has a peace plan ready. And he, Lukashenko, wants to meet with Zelensky and tell him all about it, and about how secret ties between politicians and Russian money have been exposed in Europe. Today's episode is about this and more. There will be a lot of interesting things. So if you're new to this channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So Russia has announced an attack on NATO and the start of World War III. The crazies never get any rest, as always. This was written by the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova. So according to the plan, Russia is supposed to carry out kamikaze drone strikes on NATO transport hubs in Romania and Poland. And of course, they'll blame Ukraine for it. So what have the Russians come up with this time? That Ukraine will take several Russian drones, pack them with explosives, and launch them from its training ground in western Ukraine. And these drones will fly to Poland, fly to Romania, blow something up there, and that's it. And that's supposedly how we want to set up the Russians. Basically, as always, to provoke an armed conflict, so that NATO gets drawn into the war, and that's it. And then NATO will be at war with the Russian Federation. So, in her opinion, in Zakharova's opinion, and now the source is going to be very interesting where she got this from. According to Zakharova, we've already moved the drones to the coordinates of the training grounds in western Ukraine, where, and I quote, the International Center for Peacekeeping and Security is located. And at the end, Zakharova said that if all this is confirmed, we must admit that never in modern Europe have we been so close to the start of World War III. Well then, why did you start it yourselves, against Ukraine? Alright, so the logic goes like this. Ukraine takes Russian drones, launches them with explosives into other countries, preferably NATO countries, and that's it. And then says, see what the Russians are doing. Maybe we even dressed up in Russian uniforms ourselves in 2020 and attacked ourselves. I'd like to remind you that some of my former acquaintances with whom I've completely cut off contact used to call me in the first days and say, well, it's not clear who's launching missiles at you, maybe it's not us, and nobody knows whose troops those are. So this is the logic of the Russians. And of course, where else would Ukraine launch drones from if not from an international security center, so that the international community could escort these drones? Let's clarify a few details. This is a serious statement. Most likely, the Russians are trying to protect themselves this way, so that if, say, a Russian combat drone arrives, they can say, see, we told you this is what Ukraine decided to do. Some details like that. The drones that arrived in Poland were Russian. Some of them flew through Belarus. The planes that violated Estonian airspace, a North Atlantic Treaty Organization country, the MiG-31s, were Russian. The drones that periodically enter Romania or fly through Belarus into Lithuania are also Russian. The ship that was 12 kilometers off the coast of Denmark at the moment when drones were circling above Danish airports was a Russian military landing ship. And Zakharova, this is indeed the most interesting and crucial part, gets this significant information from a specific Hungarian media outlet that is very closely aligned with Orban's government. By the way, I would also call Orban himself, as well as his government and his ships, Russian, because it really takes some effort to come up with such nonsense. So, information comes out in a media outlet close to Orban. Zakharova immediately grabs it and says, look, provocations are being prepared. It's like they're working together as a duo, like Biba and Boba. And let me remind you that yesterday Volodymyr Zelensky accused Hungary of launching drones into Ukrainian airspace for intelligence gathering purposes. But seriously now, Orban is openly siding with Russia by spreading such disinformation through controlled media outlets. Let me remind you, in May, the SBU detained agents who were working for Hungarian military intelligence, gathering information, mostly operating in Zakarpattia. I'm quoting this from the statement by the Security Service of Ukraine at the time. The task of this cell was to collect information about the military security of the Zakarpattia region and to look for vulnerabilities in the region's ground and air defenses. And now let's put all of this together. And we might come up with yet another scenario, but it will be extremely unpleasant for some. It could be that Russia really does hand over its drones so that someone could launch them from Ukrainian territory at NATO countries. Someone whose cells were operating here for military intelligence, it's possible. Or maybe that very same agent cell hasn't been completely eliminated, or new agents will be recruited. You see, this creates a completely different scenario, and the provocation is carried out very simply in just 2 steps. In other words, they've prepared everything for such a possible scenario. Now, about the risks, why this is, in principle, absolutely unnecessary for Ukraine. I very much doubt that NATO would get involved in the war, even if a Russian drone with a warhead were to hit NATO countries. I have serious doubts about that. I could be wrong. Secondly, if Ukraine wanted to pull off such a scenario, it would lose the support that Russia is so eager to deprive it of, to achieve the goal of depriving Ukraine of assistance from its European partners. So everything here has been set up precisely for that purpose. So in the end, it would turn out that NATO didn't get involved in the war, and Ukraine lost its support. And who would benefit from that, I wonder? You could even see this as a confession of guilt. On Russia's part, they could actually launch their own drones with warheads. And it doesn't even matter anymore whether they fly through Ukraine or through Belarus. They'll say, "We warned you, these aren't our drones, it's Ukraine that's launching them." That could happen, it's possible. So they're preparing for that scenario too. If a drone with a warhead arrives, we warned you. That's all there is to it. Just like Putin said, we're not in Crimea. We're not in Donbass. And then he giggled like an old flasher in a raincoat. And then he said, yes, we were there. Yes, I just fooled you a little bit once again. So it's a very unpleasant scenario. I hope it won't come to pass. But in any case, we know who's behind it. By the way, let me remind you, friends, we have an important fundraiser for the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. The commanders have recorded a message for you. Please take a look.
Greetings, friends. My call sign is Talbot. I am the commander of the Popstar Crew, 3rd Separate Assault Brigade FPV Strike Company. I am reaching out to the viewers of Boris Tizengauzen's channel with a request to contribute to the fundraiser for Matrix 30 drones.
These are excellent copters and we need them for reconnaissance. They also perform some other very interesting functions. The fundraising amount is quite significant. 1,100,000 hryvnias. We are counting on your support, on your help. Thanks to them, we will be able to destroy the enemy even more effectively and bring Ukraine's victory closer.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
It is precisely thanks to the heroism of our defenders that Putin's much vaunted summer offensive has failed. They are protecting us, but they need our help. Let's help our warriors from the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There you'll find Mono, Privat and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. I see everyone. A huge thank you to all of you. And drones in the hands of operators from the 3rd Assault Brigade are a guaranteed batch of tickets to Kobzon's concert for the occupiers. And now, about the incidents over European countries and airports. Last night, drones were spotted over the main base of the Swedish Navy. In other words, these cases are happening every day now. Over airports, over military bases and elsewhere, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. According to local reports, this is, I remind you, the main base of the Swedish Navy. The military did not intervene, but the police opened a case for violation of airspace. All of this happened near the Karlskrona archipelago, and I looked it up on the map. It is located directly across from the Kaliningrad region, across the Baltic Sea. Well, still, maybe they should shoot down at least one drone. Maybe they did shoot one down, but they're not telling us. I don't know, but for some reason they don't want to intervene. They fly around and then disappear somewhere. They're always vanishing. It's a very strange story. I mean, the reaction is strange. If Ukraine, by the way, can already offer help, if you want, we have a lot of experience shooting down these objects. But everyone seems to have some legal hurdles, like supposedly you can't shoot at a drone. Some places allow you to shoot, some don't, but overall it's kind of strange. And still, it's interesting. What kind of drones are these? I mean, reconnaissance is one thing. But if it's just to scare people to show off flying away and blinking their lights, that's something completely different. And of course, about the one who's really behind all of this. I mean, let me remind you, there was no war, there were no drones, nothing was happening, no one was flying anywhere. So about the one who's behind all of this. The moth stocked up on cards with that 100th font and went to congratulate the heads of Russian regions after the elections.
It is clear that people are counting on the continuation of the country's strategic course of development, expecting that it will bring further positive changes to their regions, to their hometowns and villages. Of course, it is very important to live up to this trust.
I specifically chose this news because he says that Russians are counting on the continuation of such a course for the country. This course will bring them even more happiness. How much more could they possibly get? In my opinion, all Russians are happy. By the way, how are things in the Kursk and Belgorod regions? Are they counting on the continuation of this strategic course of development? By the way, they've already been told that there won't be any money for rebuilding housing. There's only money for the war. That's it. And how are things with gasoline, by the way? More and more Russian regions are facing a gasoline crisis there. See how things can turn out? Today I saw footage from Crimea. There are kilometer-long lines at the gas stations there. So, is it at least raining stones from the sky there now? Well, it will be soon. And I came across an interesting piece from Crimea today. You know, I was born in Crimea myself, so I never pass by these kinds of stories. It's about how Russian pensioners who moved to Crimea are reporting everyone left and right, just looking for traitors. So after the successful strikes that hit military targets in Crimea, everyone became extremely suspicious, especially the Russian pensioners who had moved there. Let me remind you, they hadn't lived there before. And they're looking for traitors, who's giving away coordinates, who's leaking information, and so on. And they're reporting everyone indiscriminately. As a rule, their police stations are swamped with complaints. Usually they report on young people, especially if, in their opinion, the youth are behaving the wrong way. Well, that's it. Good evening. The Soviet Union is back. By the way, in Sevastopol, where I was born, near the Rakushka, that's an open-air stage, those old gangster types would gather, those Stalinist grandmas and grandpas. They're the ones who always shriek at all the rallies, screaming Putin at ultrasonic levels, like when demons are being exorcised from them, they just come out and start yelling. Putin? They really dream about it, these people, I don't even know. It's like a whole breed. They never lived well themselves and won't let anyone else live well either. They really dream of the Soviet Union coming back, with its concentration camps, execution squads, and Black Marias, then they'd really have a field day. They'd line up all the lousy intelligentsia against the wall and move into their apartments themselves. And one more thing about Putin's fans, we'll also come back to Orban today. Szijjártó, the foreign minister, wrote that Zelensky is going crazy with anti-Hungarian sentiment. This is about Zelensky's statement that Hungarian drones were snooping around and even entered our airspace. Well, that's not anti-Hungarian. I always say I don't equate Hungarians with Orban and his government. And by the way, I want to say a huge thank you to those of you from Hungary who write to me about the situation on the ground and provide interesting information. It's always very important to get information directly from the inside. So, Szijjártó decided that we have anti-Hungarian sentiment here. No, absolutely not. It's just that we have anti-scumbag sentiments. We just don't like scumbags, that's all. Otherwise, well, we'll see. I think we'll see how long Orban can last without Russian oil. The sentiment is against those who mess things up within the European Union, who disrupt collective decisions, block anti-Russian sanctions, and blockade to Ukraine. And he whines that he can't survive without Russian oil. So enjoy living without Russian oil. I'm sure Orban's regime won't last long without that oil. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and get your dose of infuriating calm in this restless world. It's like, our own little bay of tranquility here. Speaking of bays, by the way, listen, I just remembered those phrases from the registry office, And now the ship called Love is setting sail for the bay called Family. I was always amazed. How do you at the registry office come up with these? Like teachers have their own catchphrases, right? Like show of hands or tell us, we'll all have a laugh. There are even courses for that, by the way, did you know? They often say, registry office, love ship, love bay, family. So make sure to subscribe. And as they say about the bay, right? All hands on deck, anchor me in the bay. Eco-activist Greta Thunberg is sailing for the second time to the shores of Gaza. This time, Spain has sent a warship to escort her flotilla. Yes, Madrid has dispatched a patrol ship, Fury, and earlier their own frigate was also sent by Italy. According to media reports, this time Israel wants to imprison Greta Thunberg in a prison for terrorists. But last time there was only one boat and they were all deported back. Let me remind you, Greta Thunberg is an eco-activist, and it wouldn't hurt for her to focus on the old tankers of Russia's shadow fleet, which are barely holding together and are transporting huge amounts of oil, by the way, including near her own country. Well, as for patrol ships and frigates, that's a whole different story. And what about that Russian landing ship that was hanging around off the coast of Denmark for several days? Don't you want to send ships and frigates there? Well, those are some strange priorities, very strange. So, let me remind you, Sweden, Greta Thunberg's homeland, has Russian drones flying over it as if they own the place. And here's another statement, by the way, from Denmark has stated that the Danish authorities do not intend to invoke NATO's Article 4 to call for consultations over the repeated incidents involving drone incursions. Well, I don't know. In this case, Article 4, what's there to consult about? You need to shoot them down, figure out where they're coming from, and then consult. That logic makes sense to me. Yes, and by the way, it wouldn't be a bad idea if you need to figure out where these drones are coming from and what a Russian ship is doing off the coast of Denmark. It wouldn't be a bad idea to block off the Kaliningrad region. There is such an option. Russia has thought about it 100 times, and not just about causing trouble with drones, but also about turning on their electronic warfare systems, which create interference for airliners and ships. There have been several incidents. Planes have had to land because of this interference, and all of this is coming from the Kaliningrad region. Just block it off, that's all. Let them sit there and think about it. Let them think 100 times whether they should turn on their electronic warfare or not. And yes, you have Putin's Achilles heel constantly darting around in front of you, the shadow fleet. Well, you can deal with that too. Zelensky denied rumors that Trump urged him to bomb Putin's house. No, that's not true, he replied. He said this in response to a question from an Axios journalist. Well, why not indeed, or why isn't it entirely true? Perhaps in this particular instance, Donald Trump himself didn't explicitly ask, but the specific way the question is framed is certainly quite interesting. Bombing Putin's house, I think, is a very, very good idea. Putin is bombing the homes of Ukrainians, so Putin's house to the place where he has his bunkers, where his little bunker dwellers and little Kabayan dwellers are sitting. Let them feel it a little. As Zelensky said, let them know where the bunker is. And I think they don't even leave it. By the way, Moscow threatened Zelensky with a retaliatory strike. That was Medvedev making the threat. And by the way, he didn't just threaten Zelensky, he also threatened the Americans. Imagine how brave Medvedev has become. That wizard from the Emerald City, Goodwin, probably gifted him a little bottle of courage, so now he's writing and threatening everyone. By the way, lately there's been some crazy invasion of Russian bots in the comments. I mean, honestly, I'm just tired of banning them. The accounts are usually created just a few hours ago, at most a few days. And they have some kind of cartoonish avatars and write things like, you're all lying, your drones didn't hit anything, surrender, Russia is coming, it's over for Ukraine, and so on. But I absolutely ban them, though I always leave a couple so that you and other people can clearly see what kind of truly awful scumbags they really are. Speaking of watching, the head of the IAEA, Grossi, came to Moscow and stated that he would not name those responsible for the shelling near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, so as not to interfere with ensuring its safety. Seriously? He won't name them? I don't see anything, I don't see, who's bombing? I don't see anything. Let me remind you, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is occupied. So when are the Russians going to leave it? Absolutely nothing will happen then. Can you imagine, wherever Russia isn't present, no one bombs anything there? So why don't you tell us, Mr. Grossi, who is in the capital of the Russian Federation, in Moscow, he met with Putin and also with the CEO of Rosatom Likachev. Let me remind you, Grossi is a possible candidate for the new UN Secretary General. Basically, it's all the same. One didn't see anything and shook hands with Putin. What is this? No, I won't. There's no need to stir up our stagnant waters here. We're nice and cozy in our swamp. Everything suits us just fine. And Grossi also said that it was a very important conversation with Putin. Really great, just fantastic. And he did say one reasonable thing, that it's necessary to take any measures needed to avoid a nuclear incident in the context of the war in Ukraine, not all necessary measures. I agree with that, but you could have taken those measures right there. Just smack that bald head with a snuff box, and that would be all the measures needed at the moment, instead of kissing Putin's ass over there. And Putin expressed his condolences over the death of Tigran Keosayan, according to the Kremlin. Let me remind you then, a glass-wool propagandist who justified the war has died. May the earth be glass-wool for him. And today I came across a video of him saying, guys, we'll be in Kyiv soon, really soon, don't worry. So why aren't you in Kyiv then? He flew straight to hell for a concert with Kobzon. It almost worked out, huh? So that's how it is. Putin probably really felt for him because he's the husband of Keosayan Simonian, and she's a top propagandist, just the very top. By the way, Skabiva hasn't been heard from lately. Maybe something happened to her too, huh? And Putin said that he did a lot to preserve and develop the best traditions of Russian cinema. He enriched the country's cultural life with vivid and original works. Yeah, I remember fragments of his, what was it called, Pilorama? Well, it was just some kind of dull trash, really. So, at Keosayan's funeral, they tore 2 bayans. Goodbye. Wait for all your other buddies there. They'll be there soon. And Orban, as I mentioned before, we'll get back to him, said that if Hungary gives up Russian oil and gas, its economy will be brought to its knees. He said this to Donald Trump. The fact that Orban himself has long been on his knees before Putin doesn't seem to bother anyone, apparently. Well, what problems are there, really? What problems? If the collective decisions of the European Union are a thorn in your side, there's the customs union, there's NATO for the privileged and the poor, it's called the CSTO, where no one forbids you from guzzling Russian oil to your heart's content. So what's the problem? The problem is that the moment he even hints at this, Orban I mean, they'll just carry him out of the palace. So he has to somehow balance things, kiss up to Putin and at the same time ask for money from European funds. The question is, how long will the European Union put up with this? Well, Orban is just engaging in plain old blackmail. In other words, he blocks a collective decision and says he'll unblock it in exchange for some perks. The voting reform they're talking about now. They're actively pushing it, and it would instantly nullify all his blackmailing skills. But they're pushing it just not as actively as one would like. And Lukashenko met with Putin at the nuclear forum and immediately ran off to blab about it. Many have noticed that lately Lukashenko has been acting as a sort of interpreter for Putin. He is given the talking points that, for some reason, Putin himself doesn't dare to voice. Lukashenko stated that he would like to talk to Volodymyr Zelensky and said the following: Vladimir Alexandrovich needs to calm down. There's a good proposal on the table. We discussed it with President Putin. I won't say more. The president will announce it himself. A good proposal. He emphasized that the leaders of the 3 Slavic countries need to come to an agreement to end the war. What is there to agree on with you? Oh, our dear tuber-faced one. And Lukashenko also said that if we don't come to an agreement, it will be bad for everyone. Lukashenko's problem is that no one wants to talk to him, because he is an accomplice to the war. Russian troops entered from the territory of Belarus just as they did from the territory of Russia. Missiles were launched from Belarusian airspace. 50 or even more Belarusian enterprises are working for the Russian military-industrial complex. After those atrocities in Bucha and Irpin, Russian troops loaded with loot retreated through Belarus. So Belarusian oil refineries are supplying fuel to the Russians for this war. So most likely Lukashenko will end up talking to the Kalinowski regiment or to some other Belarusian units that will return to Belarus and hold him accountable. And these won't be students who can be beaten and thrown into police vans with impunity. It feels like no one will dare to wave weapons in front of these Belarusian volunteers. And Lukashenko is terribly afraid of this. I think he understands that his military won't fight against them. That's why he always pretends to be some clueless collective farm guy and goes on about what a peacemaker he is. By the way, speaking of bots, there are also real, totally obsessed people who show up. And just recently, I had this one pensioner from Donetsk, he's probably a hardcore Stalinist, at least judging by his photos, reach out to me. And he kept writing, saying everything here in Donetsk is wonderful, that with the arrival of the Russian world, everything is blooming and thriving. Well, we know about the smell, but it's definitely not blooming. He kept writing and writing, bombarding me with tons of comments until I finally banned him. And I only banned him after he started spamming, probably leaving 20 or 30 comments at a time. And the comments were all the same, like too much rambling, get to the point, stop talking nonsense, and so on. I thought, but you're from Donetsk, how can you say there's too much water? Well, I wrote something like that to him, maybe a bit of dark humor, but what can you do? And of course he lost it, and then the gates of his foul mouth just burst open, but he didn't have time to write too many nasty things, so I had to ban him. Well, that's how it goes. Now, about what most often lies behind pro-Russian statements by European politicians. It's all banal and simple. Today there's a delightful, well actually the news came out yesterday, a delightful piece of news. British politician and former member of the European Parliament, Nathan Gill, admitted in court that he took bribes to promote pro-Russian narratives. The New York Times reports on this. And he received money 8 times from Oleg Voloshin. He's a member of the OPZZ party who fled Ukraine on charges of treason. He's facing charges which means he could get up to 15 years. He fled together with his family, I think, to Belarus. Yes, definitely to Belarus. And his wife, I believe, is now hosting some kind of Lukashenko propaganda program there. So how did this British politician get caught? At the airport, during some kind of inspection. They wanted to check something on his phone and found this correspondence. And Voloshin was giving him instructions via WhatsApp. Let me remind you, above Voloshin is Medvedev. Medvedev is just this unsinkable scoundrel. He's got his sticky fingers everywhere. Right now, there are investigations underway in Europe into several cases of how his platform, Voice of Europe, was corrupting European politicians. So, there you have it. They released this Gill on bail. I ran into this Voloshin a few times before the war on various broadcasts. An unpleasant guy, but unfortunately not stupid at all. And I think he's a real ideologue of the Russian world. And I'm not surprised that he was the one entrusted with these shady dealings of corrupting European politicians, but I think now he'll get hit with additional sanctions for that. So every time someone makes a pro-Russian statement, know that at some point, either before or during, someone like Voloshin came up to them and slipped something into their pocket. So yes. And I think now people will be least likely to interact with these Medvedchuk envoys. By the way, they've holed up in 3 gathering points. Belarus, obviously, Hungary, and Austria. I think no one will extradite them from there to anyone. Well, it's interesting, we'll see. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's help our warriors from the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. The donation details are in the video description. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.